Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar session, Rising Together, Uplifting Women's Entrepreneurship in the Face of COVID-19. For all the women that are out there, happy Women's History Month. My name is Ibrahima Soare, Senior Community Development Officer with LISC New York City. Before we start our programming for today, I want to share a few housekeeping reminders. One, all attendees have been muted and will remain muted for the entirety of today's fireside chat. Two, should you have any questions or comments, we ask that you utilize the chat box. Three, please submit all questions pertaining to the presentation using the Q&A. We have set aside time to address all submitted questions from the audience. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the webinar and any materials will be made available afterwards. At this time, I introduce to you the Executive Director of LISC New York City, Ms. Valerie White.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Ibrahima. On behalf of LISC New York City, I welcome you all to our Women's History Month event. LISC is a national nonprofit, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, established in 1980. And we raise and invest capital in disinvested, underutilized, marginalized communities that help bring along low and moderate income Americans across the country, and of course here in New York. Now, since April 2020 at LISC New York City, our investment strategy has been guided by three pillars, and it actually stands on the platform of racial and economic equity. Those pillars include radical healing that counters racial bias and inequity, and we do so through community safety, creative placemaking, and art initiatives. The second pillar is an inclusive economic transformation that prioritizes human talent, community health, diverse enterprises, innovation, and of course, public and community infrastructure. And the third is sustainable wealth generation in communities of color through ownership, and that's both home ownership as well as entrepreneurship, which we'll hear a lot about today, asset building, and career ladders and careers and industries of the future. At LISC New York City, we believe this is the time to forge a future for New York City that eradicates the racial wealth gap for good, protects affordable housing for low to moderate income New Yorkers, builds on commercial quarters and community infrastructure, and actually builds a pathway for meaningful economic opportunity for all. As we have seen all through the pandemic, it has wreaked havoc on small businesses across the country, forcing many to have to halt or curtail their operations due to health protocols and other inequities. This has caused many small businesses to lose revenue, insignificant or incur significant debt, and in some cases have to actually close their doors. We also know that the COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected small businesses owned by women and people of color, many of whom were already struggling and at a disadvantage prior to the pandemic due to racial and gender discrimination that has plagued our systems. So in order to address this, throughout the pandemic, LISC New York City has supported community-based partners to provide critical relief funds and technical assistance to help minority and women-owned businesses to overcome these challenges and not only survive, but grow and thrive. As we continue to plan to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic for communities across New York City and the small businesses that are within them, we believe today's topic of empowering and supporting women-owned small business is especially important discussion to have today. So on behalf of the LISC New York City team, I want to thank our four phenomenal panelists for taking time to share their insights and knowledge about women's entrepreneurship with us today. And I thank you all for joining, and I hope you enjoyed the program. Now, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Denise Scott, LISC President, National President, for some framing remarks about the importance of women's entrepreneurship. Hi, Denise, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Valerie, and thank you. Thank you for this event and for inviting me to share some time with you. It's really an honor to be here for a topic that's so near and dear to me. I come from a family, a legacy of educating and supporting girls and women in the family to achieve professional careers and entrepreneurships. My parents were business people. Although if my mom could tell it, she would say she ran the business. My parents often said, each one teach one, expecting us not only to reach for higher places for ourselves, but to inspire others to achieve. And so I come to this table and to the work that I do at LISC with this passion for empowering entrepreneurs and especially women of color. And I'm really proud to be a part of a movement within LISC that has become our signature program under the banner of 10X to focus on racial pledges in support of entrepreneurship and specifically women and to empower women. My take today, on the topic of uplifting women's entrepreneurship in the face of COVID-19, as I said, is informed by both my professional and lived experience. I know what it's like to be one of the few women of color in the field or in the room when decisions are being made. My first role at LISC was the managing director of New York City program, a position I held for 14 years. In the early days, I was often one of the few women and the only Black woman in the room, responsible for major projects like the production of thousands of units of tax credits financed by different tools for affordable housing. I also know that you have to work twice as hard to gain the credibility for vision and for plans. And so I share with many of the women entrepreneurs who come to the table having to work really hard, harder than others at the table, to have their pitches and their vision taken seriously, especially when it comes to accessing capital. And that's why I think today's topic is so important. It's especially critical to support women entrepreneurs in light of the pandemic. As Valerie said, the pandemic has disproportionately affected many underinvested communities, but has had a devastating impact on women, especially women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color. According to the World Bank, women entrepreneurs have sacrificed more time than male entrepreneurs to undertake unpaid care during the pandemic, including unpaid childcare, adult care, domestic work, and putting a real strain on their businesses. Business sectors dominated by women, such as personal services, hospitality, education, and childcare services, have been some of the hardest hit by the pandemic. But despite these challenges, I'm very hopeful, and I can tell by the 4 panelists we have here today, they are very hopeful that we will be able, with the support of LISC and other organizations like LISC, other business development organizations and partners, will be able to really achieve great heights. A report by the New York City Department of Small Business Services documented that women's entrepreneurship was booming before the pandemic. So we have a place to get back to and beyond. Between 2014 and 2019, the number of women-owned businesses in the United States increased by 21%. Firms owned by women of color grew at double that rate, 43%. About 5% of all women-owned businesses, or nearly 600,000, operated here in New York City. That's the largest concentration of women-owned businesses in any city in the United States. These statistics prove that women entrepreneurs are vital to the local New York City economy, employing more than 321,000 people and generating $471 billion in annual revenue. Our reason for concern is that this post-pandemic, since the pandemic, many of the women-owned businesses have really been struggling. On a national scale, between February and May 2020, 25% of women-owned businesses closed either temporarily or permanently. Uneven access to relief loans by minority women-owned businesses, coupled with longstanding racial and socioeconomic disparities in business ownership, have contributed to these issues. New York City has to figure out how to rebuild its economy equitably. And by that, we mean it has to include women entrepreneurs. The pandemic has been a major crisis, but the crisis will continue if we cannot reimagine and rethink things that include the support of women entrepreneurs. How can we redesign and support commercial areas that house restaurants and other hospitality services in a way that enables these businesses, many of whom are women-owned, to thrive? How can government partner with community-based not-for-profits and intermediaries like LISC to truly create an ecosystem of support for minority-owned businesses, particularly those owned by women of color? Considering the prevalence of women-owned businesses in hospitality and personal service industries, New York City needs to be intentional about rebuilding with a focus on women's entrepreneurship. Given the historic number of women who were elected to the New York City Council this year, I'm hopeful that there will be an increased focus on policies that directly affect and empower women, such as childcare, guidelines on in-person work, and services that support the stability of families. A lot of women in the City Council. We can only go upwards with this. I'm also very hopeful that new policies and practices can help break down systemic barriers and shatter the glass ceiling for many women, especially female entrepreneurs. Here at LISC, providing loans and grants to support MWBEs and providing the capacity, helping to build the capacity of businesses and business organizations that help those entrepreneurs has been a major focus of our work during the pandemic. Increasing access to capital for women-owned businesses is critical at this pivotal moment. As my parents always taught me, in life and in business, one must never forget the importance of community. At LISC, the local in our name is not taken for granted as we strive to continue to support women in entrepreneurship. And now I'm going to hand the mic off to Eva, our Deputy Director for New York City LISC. And I look forward to the 4 fabulous women who are our panelists today to hear about their experiences and their insights and all that we can do to support you and many women like you. That is what we're all about. Valerie, thank you for inviting me to join you today. Eva, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise, and also Valerie earlier for those really inspiring remarks. And welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Eva Alligood, and I'm the Deputy Director of LISC New York City. I'm going to be really brief, but before we kick off our panel today, I wanted to provide you all with a bit more background on who we have gathered for this really important topic. As Valerie mentioned, since the beginning of the pandemic, LISC New York City has tapped and supported a critical network of community-based organizations throughout New York City with deep connections to and knowledge of small businesses in their neighborhoods. These helping organizations and experts with knowledge of the needs of minority-owned small businesses have played a critical role in helping entrepreneurs to navigate the complicated relief systems and access much needed resources. This role is vital because, as we know, many of these small businesses have had great difficulty in tapping government and other sources of support. 3 of our panelists today have extensive experience in helping BIPOC-owned businesses overcome these challenges through their work at deeply rooted nonprofit organizations. And those 3 panelists are Irene Dominguez, Director of Business Services at the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, Oma Holloway, the Chief Operating Officer at Bridge Street Development Corporation, and Jessie Lee, the Managing Director at Renaissance Economic Development Corporation, which is an affiliate of Asian Americans for Equality. Our 4th panelist, Danielle Douglas, President and CEO of Inspire Enterprise, is an entrepreneur and expert consultant who assisted LISC New York City and our community-based partners to tailor pro bono support of our corporate partner, the Macari Group, to the needs of our Small Business Relief Fund grantees through something we called a Relaunch Academy Day last year. So as you can see, our panelists will have a lot to share on today's topic, uplifting women's entrepreneurship in the face of COVID-19. Before I hand things off, I want to give a really big shout out to the LISC New York City programs team who put this panel together and will be moderating the rest of our program. Assistant Community Development Officer Emilio Gonzalez and Community Development Officers Talor Crawford and Leah Martins-Krasner came up with today's topic, curated the questions, and assembled the speakers you'll hear from today. They are an awesome team led by Senior Community Development Officer Ibrahima Soare, and they are incredibly talented emerging leaders in the field of community development who are passionately dedicated to LISC's mission. Leah unfortunately couldn't join us today as she's out sick, but with that, I will hand things off to Talor, who's going to facilitate some audience engagement. Thank you, Talor.
Thank you so much, Eva. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Eva mentioned, my name is Talor Crawford, and I'm a Community Development Officer with LISC NYC. So we wanted to have a short interactive segment to start us off today. So I'm briefly going to share my screen here. So if you all would like to participate, please go to the link that is now on your screen. I think it's also going to be shared in the chat box so that you can follow it there, but you can either join it on your phone or your computer in order to participate. You may skip adding your name or adding a screen name at the bottom of your screen and just continue as a guest. So I'll give you all a few moments to join, and then we will get started. Okay, so first we wanted to get to know a bit about who's in the audience with us today. So specifically, from what location are you joining us? If you are in New York City, feel free to share what borough or neighborhood you're in. If you're from outside of New York City, feel free to share your state, city, or town. So I see some responses are rolling in, but feel free to keep sharing responses. And then we'll move on to the next question. So it looks like there is a lot of New York City being represented here today, which makes sense. Lots of Brooklyn. Okay, also Connecticut, great. Thank you so much for joining us. Queens, okay, great. New York City. Bed-Stuy, great to have you here with us. Okay, Westchester, thank you. The Bronx is represented as well. More Brooklyn, lots of Brooklyn in the house today, great. Milwaukee, great. We have some representation outside of New York City and New York State. Okay, for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So to move on to the next kind of section for today, we wanted to cover a few statistics about women's entrepreneurship and women's owned businesses in New York City. So what borough do you think has the greatest share of women-owned businesses in New York City? Looks like we have some responses rolling in. Looks like many of you all believe Brooklyn is the correct answer, but I'll give you a few moments to keep sharing your responses. Okay, looks like Brooklyn is still in the lead. Queens is shortly behind. No responses for Staten Island thus far. Okay, great. I'm gonna go ahead and lock responses there. So many of you all thought Brooklyn was the correct answer, and indeed it is. Brooklyn does have the largest amount of women-owned small businesses. Actually, 31% of women-owned businesses in New York City are in Brooklyn. We'll move on to the last question here. What percent of the United States' share of women-owned small businesses do you think operate in New York City? This answer was shared previously by one of our speakers. So if you all were listening, you did hear the correct answer there. but do you think it's 2%, 10%, 5%, or 15%? So looks like thus far, 15% is in the lead. Still between 10 and 15%. I'll give you all a few more moments to let your answers come in. Okay, for the sake of time, I will stop. Correct answer is actually 5%. So about 5% of all women-owned small businesses operate in New York City, which, as Denise mentioned, is the largest concentration of women-owned small businesses in any city in the United States. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Thank you all so much for your participation and getting us started today with a bit of an interactive activity. I will now pass things over to Emilio Gonzalez, who is our moderator for this afternoon. He is an Assistant Community Development Officer with LISC NYC. So Emilio, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emilio Gonzalez, as previously mentioned. I'd like to quickly echo Valerie, Denise, and Eva's statements and thank our esteemed panelists for taking time out of their afternoon to share their insights on such an important topic, women entrepreneurship in the face of COVID-19. I'd love to dive right into the discussion by opening the floor to our four panelists for you all to tell us a little bit about your current role and how you support women's entrepreneurship and women-owned business. We can start with Irene.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Emilio. And I just want to start by thanking Valerie and LISC, the whole LISC team, for inviting us to participate in this, and say that it's been a pleasure working with you always. I am the Director of Business Services at the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce. We are a nonprofit organization. We are based in Harlem in New York. We serve our area, but the Bronx, we serve New York City and even New York State. Our services are mainly focused on women and minority-owned businesses. They're very small businesses, the ones that we serve. It is work that we really enjoy. We provide one-on-one services. We provide educational services on various topics that pertain to small businesses. Another sort of specialization we're very strong on our programming for MWBEs. We assist anyone who would like to get certified as an MWBE. And not only that, we also have programming for after you get certified, so that we can support the next step, which would be getting the contracts, understanding how the CD system works. So that's the kind of work we do. We also have a lot of initiatives for the community. We have an Explore West Harlem initiative, so that you can come and have a taste of food of West Harlem restaurants. And we participate a lot in other initiatives that are already going on here in Harlem like that. Personally, I've enjoyed crazily all of these Harlem related initiatives, but I'll leave it at that to let my other co-panelists speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari, and I can attest that the food in West Harlem is delicious. Danielle, can you follow that up with a little bit about your current role and how you support women's entrepreneurship?
Thank you. And I want to also say thank you to LISC NYC for inviting me to be a panel for today's Women Histories Month event. And again, I am Danielle Douglas. I am President and CEO of Inspire Enterprise, as well as founder of the Black Business Owners Forum and the Council for Black Business Enterprises. Across the different program, I would say the different organizations that I lead and initiatives that I embark on, I see myself as a capacity builder, advocate, and a change agent. As a capacity builder, I've had the opportunity to create and facilitate capacity building programs for entrepreneurs. One of the very first programs that I created was specifically for women entrepreneurs for Bach Capital. It was the Live Your Vision series, and that was over 15 years ago. And I am happy to say that I actually developed business relationships as well as friendships with the women that participated in that program, and I'm still engaged with them in some form of fashion even today. As an advocate, I founded the Council for Black Business Enterprises, and that was to ensure that business owners such as myself had a seat at the table and could lend their voices to policies and practices that were being made for them. Collectively as a group, the Council for Black Business Enterprises is a community of stakeholders who have really taken on a shared responsibility to address the disparities experienced by Black business owners in the New York State and New York City contracting systems. Our mandate is critically important, particularly for Black-owned women owners, and I should say business owners. They obtain, and I'm a Black female as well, so I should say we obtain no more than 2% of contract dollars awarded in professional services. And for construction-related services, it is less than 1%. And so we see ourselves as champions, we see ourselves as advocates, and this is critically important, even more so now in the midst of all that business owners have been going through, particularly female entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Danielle, for that background and all the work that you do with the Council of Black Business Enterprise. I'd like to pass the mic to Oma Holloway for you to share with us a little bit about your role and how you support women's entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Emilio. And I would like to also thank Valerie White and the LISC NYC team for the invitation to be on this panel today, but also for your ongoing support, especially through this pandemic. My name is Oma Holloway. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Good Street Development Corporation. We are a community development corporation that's been in the Bedford-Stuyvesant community since 1995, providing civic and economic opportunities to the residents of Central Brooklyn, particularly in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And our goal is to really uplift and with an emphasis on our low to moderate income residents. Over the past 10 years, we have been active in the community and providing economic development support for our local businesses. We have been an active partner with the Tompkins Avenue Merchants Association, which has currently over 25 paid members who are owners of businesses on Tompkins Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant, most of which 70% are women business owners. Most of those the majority of those women are Black women. And during the pandemic, we had the opportunity to do a commercial district needs assessment in partnership with NYC Small Business Services, where we were able in real time, this happened over the last 2 years, see what was happening with our businesses on 6 major corridors in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So we were able to do an inventory of what was going on with our businesses. We were able to collect real data on the number of minority-owned businesses and what the impact of COVID was having on our businesses during this really critical time. From a result of that, the partnerships we developed with organizations like LISC NYC, we were able to offer over $100,000 in relief funds to many of our business owners, particularly women of color, who needed that support to stay afloat, also the resources that came with that. And over the last year, we embarked on a very ambitious initiative to be an open street in Bedford-Stuyvesant. We did that on Tompkins Avenue. We were very ambitious, but to know that what the impact that came out of our data and talking to our business owners was how do we bring foot traffic during this very difficult time or help our businesses, especially our women-owned businesses, pivot so that they could not only survive, but thrive through this very difficult time. So we have been very aggressive on making sure that we were able to have access to funds, to resources and supports that were provided by government agencies or other organizations such as LISC NYC to make sure that that information, those resources, those grants went directly to our women-owned business owners in Bedford-Stuyvesant. So we're really excited about what we were able to accomplish, but know there's so much more that needs to be done for our local businesses. And we wanted to be at the forefront, on the ground, doing that in partnership with our local women-owned businesses.
Thank you for sharing that, Oma. I've had the pleasure of seeing firsthand the impact that your work has had on Tompkins Avenue, so we appreciate all your efforts. Lastly, I'd like to pass the mic to Jesse for you to share a little bit about some of your experience and the work that you do to support women entrepreneurship.
Hi, everyone. First, thank you to LISC for inviting me on this panel and to be on the panel of such amazing women. This is women power, women leadership here. So my name is Jessie Lee. I'm the Managing Director of Renaissance Economic Development. So I operate Renaissance, which is a nonprofit. But myself, to tell you the truth, this is my passion work because my mom was an entrepreneur. She was a Chinatown restaurant owner, and I was a child who grew up in a small business. So that was my day-to-day after school, was helping my mom in a small business. So I really understand and empathize and have firsthand experience what it means to be a women entrepreneur and the challenges to that and running a business, especially a minority woman. So Renaissance is a nonprofit organization that's 25 years old. We've been serving in New York City, 5 boroughs, helping businesses start up a business and helping existing businesses with any challenges they have. So we provide education, technical assistance, access to capital. So for Renaissance, we actually lend directly to small businesses up to $250,000. And we're especially focused on minority women-owned business owners. So I would say in a given year, we probably see about 600 to 700 entrepreneurs. 50% of our clients are women-owned entrepreneurs. And over the 25 years, Renaissance has deployed $60 million to small business owners. 50% of those funds went to women business owners. So we are very focused and empowering women and giving them a voice and making sure that, when we think about women entrepreneurship, it's really about they're leading a pathway and building wealth for their family and for themselves. And we want to support that in many ways. The Renaissance team is very diverse. So among my entire staff, we speak Chinese, Spanish, Korean, Creole, French, Hindi. So we're really focused on especially, the minority population, those who are new immigrants. I would say a lot of times when they're a new immigrant, women have to focus on taking care of the family and financially supporting the family. And Renaissance has been hand in hand with these women entrepreneurs and hand-holding them through the way. So again, been doing this for 25 years, focused in New York City, 5 boroughs. So I look forward to this panel discussion.
Thank you, Jesse. It's very obvious to me how passionate you are about all your work, specifically with all those phenomenal stats and numbers that you just shared. So I think as all of our panelists have unique insights based on their experience working with women-owned businesses and specifically in different catchment areas, I was wondering if you all could expand on how you think the COVID-19 pandemic has uniquely affected women-owned businesses and inspiring women entrepreneurs. And Danielle, you can start us off, please.
Thank you, Emilio. Well, as Denise shared with us, we know that more often than not, women are the primary caregivers of the children, as well as if they have parents in the home. And COVID-19 exacerbated that because children were at home for school, as well as children may have been sick. Women entrepreneurs may have been sick themselves, as well as they may have had to take care of, elderly parents or any other elderly family members that were sick in general or with COVID, while trying to manage their businesses, grow their businesses, and pivot and adapt as in response to COVID-19. There was a study that was actually done by the International Trade Center. 64% of women-led firms declared that their business operations were strongly affected by COVID-19 in comparison to 52% of men-led companies. Also, according to Biz2Credit, approximately 25% of women-owned businesses are in the service industry. That's not including the food industry, which is another 10%. And more than 90% of women entrepreneurs reported a decrease in their sales during the pandemic and had less than 3 months of cash flow to survive. And that was another survey that was done. So this is interesting times for women entrepreneurs, but they still have found an opportunity to grow their businesses and adapt, because we are by nature multitaskers, and that's one thing that we do well. You know, Denise brought up the fact that access to capital is something that is an issue for female entrepreneurs, and it was more difficult for female entrepreneurs to get capital than their male counterparts. When they did get capital, they got less than 33%, or they got approximately 33% of what their male counterparts got. And that is extremely important because as they navigate, especially being in a service, more often than not, in professional services, we know that now being on a digital platform is more important than ever. And so they've had to have that capital resources, not only to maintain their businesses and try to grow, but to be able to also pivot and create a digital infrastructure so that they can continue to build a solid foundation to grow their businesses moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that powerful insight, Danielle. It's crazy to hear those stats, but I think having these conversations are necessary if changes are going to be implemented, right? Irene, I was wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on how the pandemic has impacted the women-owned businesses that you serve in Manhattan and in the Bronx.
I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah, Danielle's statistics are very illustrative. And we have been conducting surveys within the people that we serve to see how COVID has impacted them. And from a survey that we're now processing, I can already tell you the majority. So we asked several questions, but one of the questions is, how has the pandemic, what was the pandemic's overall effect on your business? So overall effect, nothing specific. But 85% of them, of the respondents, have said that it was a negative effect. Some people in retail, they've had a positive effect, but the overwhelming majority is they've experienced a negative effect. We've also explored a little bit the effect on employment, because funders are always, and for the economy, everybody's interested. So what's happened with the people that you've employed? So we asked whether the number of people they employed has increased, decreased, or stayed the same. And 65% of our women, this is only women, because we did ask of entrepreneurs that we serve, but I'm giving you the statistics only for the women. 65% of them said that the number of people that they employ or they pay at all has gone down. So definitely overall, the pandemic has had a negative impact on our small business owners. As I mentioned, these are businesses that we serve, and we focus mostly on women and minority-owned businesses. We also have a focus on certain industries. We're very strong, for example, serving the beauty industry here and in the Bronx and citywide. And that is an industry, I believe Denise was mentioning it as well, is one of the industries that, or childcare, I think Denise mentioned, but beauty as well. Childcare is also a big group that we serve, but the beauty industry was particularly hit during the lockdown months, and they are still struggling with rent that they couldn't pay, for example, during the lockdown. And they had these hesitant customers, so for the longest time, that they had to deal with. And part of the work that we did was also guiding them through the ever-changing rules about COVID for their businesses. So all of those are challenges that I just wanted to highlight, not just for women, but for women in particular industries like the beauty industry, which is dominated by them.
Thank you, Irene, for sharing your specific insights on the women-owned businesses in your demographic. Specifically, I think a lot of times people like to pretend or like to talk themselves into believing the pandemic is over, but your stats shared that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in a lot of communities and individuals that need to be helped. Jesse, I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted the businesses you serve in downtown Manhattan and in Queens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we serve predominantly, a lot of it are immigrant business owners. And so, during the pandemic, it was very, very difficult for them because of the language barriers. They didn't even know that there was SBA PPP loans available to them, right? Because all that material was in English. So, during the last 2 years of the pandemic, Renaissance was a resource to all our business owners because we were translating all these city regulation and government, funding sources all into these various languages for our business owners to understand and to even access. So, in the last 2 years, Renaissance saw thousands of businesses coming to us, and we deployed nearly $10 million of emergency loans and grants to our entrepreneurs. And it was really trying to save them and trying to save their business. And especially for women entrepreneurs, they were juggling a lot because not only were they trying to figure out how to save their business, but they were trying to save their family members. Like many, they had elderly parents that they had to take care of. Then they had to figure out childcare and, remote learning and children at home and who's taking care of the children. When we were counseling our women entrepreneurs during the pandemic, we were like, don't worry. How about just get on a Zoom call with us, tell us what you need. We'll take care of all the paperwork for you. We'll meet you where you're at to do all the paperwork for you, fill it out for you, just give us the information and let us do the legwork for you, right? And then I think that was what was going on during the pandemic. We were just right there hand-holding our women entrepreneurs while they were juggling both the business and the family. And, they were beyond multitasking at that point. And so we understood that out of this pandemic, it really shed a light on childcare, daycare, balancing that. And, when we think about it, it's really unfortunate that to this day, we don't have universal daycare or childcare for our families, and especially for women entrepreneurs. If we want to foster women entrepreneur and really see it grow further, we need to talk about the daycare and childcare that we're providing.
Thank you, Jesse. Considering how diverse New York City is, I would hope that, these resources would be conveyed in multiple languages, but it just goes to show how important organizations like Renaissance are in bridging that gap here in this ecosystem. Oma, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how you think the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the businesses that you serve in Brooklyn.
I could articulate the same thing that all the other panelists said. The same thing is happening to the women entrepreneurs in Brooklyn. I do think that it was interesting to be able to do a commercial district needs assessment at the same time. And, through our surveys and the information received, we knew immediately that over 70% of the businesses had lost 70% of their revenue, close to 70% of their revenue at that particular time. And so the impact on women entrepreneurs were pretty dire, as many of them were not only the primary caregivers and breadwinners in some respects in their families, they were also facing all the challenges that came with trying to access capital, trying to access funds, dealing with regulations that were happening, trying to navigate all the rules that were changing on almost a daily basis. and at the same time, how to research any of these resources that were out there and see if they qualified. And that became one of the biggest challenges, that even if the resources were out there were barriers to some of them actually qualifying for some of the funds and the grants. And one opportunity that came with the LISC NYC LISC grant, we were asked to actually help the businesses fill out the application. What that meant for our staff and our team was that we were able to talk directly to these businesses face to face, regardless of the 6 feet apart, and we were able to have direct communication with our businesses to find out what the story was, what was going on in their families. And what we found out, it's not only the struggle of trying to keep their business afloat, it was also the struggle on what role they played in the community, what role they played in their own household, and what the mental health challenges that they were also facing, trying to keep this all together. And what support could be out there for them beyond just the money, beyond just what are the most immediate resources. So as a community development corporation, we really had to try to be supportive on both ends, making sure that we could get some of these resources, but how we could also effectively communicate, especially with the women entrepreneurs who were able to kind of communicate with each other and how to support each other and how to find out other opportunities that could help them stay afloat, but can also help them thrive. And what was interesting that we found on some of the corridors, that as some of them were able to access resources, they would also share that with each other, and then how to facilitate that conversation, or when other opportunities arise, how we could set a platform for them to take advantage of if there were some opportunities that could grow out of this pandemic so that they could expand. So, as as we look at what were the challenges, it was also immediate that we had to be there to come up with solutions and also help them facilitate their own solutions and support one another. One of the things that we were proud of before the pandemic was, at least on Tompkins Avenue, we were calling it, it was also coined Black Girl Magic Grow, looking at the number of women-owned, Black-owned businesses that were on that particular corridor. But what that also generated was also a recognition of, beyond just Tompkins Avenue, how many Black-owned businesses were throughout Bedford-Stuyvesant, and how we could partner with other groups to make sure they got the resources also. And that was, becoming extremely important, that we were able to make sure that we were shining lights, not just on one corridor, but on all. And that was extremely important, and also let them be the catalyst for supporting one another. I think that was also vitally important, because they brought a lot to the table, and we needed to make sure that that was happening amongst all of them.
Thank you, Oma. I'm pretty sure I've seen a segment on TV about the Black Girl Magic Row. So I'm glad that they have been getting that exposure and shining the light on how impactful women-owned businesses can be in Brooklyn. Shifting gears a little bit, outside of the pandemic, Irene, I was wondering if you could elaborate on what kind of unique assumptions or challenges you think women entrepreneurs face, as you at the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce typically work with women-owned entrepreneurs.
Sure. I want to thank Oma for mentioning the mental health element. I hadn't thought of that, but once she mentioned it, that's actually something that our staff is also bringing up. So I want to reinforce that one is a challenge that our business owners share as well. But from the things that we hear, as I mentioned before, the rent is becoming a little bit more of a burden for some. Even those who managed to pay their rent and don't have arrears are struggling, because they are reporting that the costs of running their businesses tend to be higher. They're just having trouble making a profit. But In terms of the unique challenges, I was thinking it will depend a lot on the type of business, the size of the business, and the industries once more. I feel like part of the one group that we serve a variety of groups. So one of the groups that we serve also has the language barrier that Jesse was talking about. We have Hispanic business owners who have really, really small businesses. Sometimes it's a one-woman show. They have struggled because they also couldn't access capital. They may just be too small, or they couldn't access capital for other reasons, such as lack of understanding of certain ways in which the systems here in the US work, or not very aware of what the information in their taxes is, how to read it. Our organization has taken the role more and more, given this, to do educational initiatives on that. But it is a challenge that is enduring, and also for that population as well. I'm thinking of that population right now. The digital gap is also a thing. It's hard. Not sure how much of that is just women as opposed to everyone in the community, and in the Hispanic community that sometimes has been more detached from the world. And for example, applications, right? Applications for these grants, government grants, tend to be online, and you have to understand how to do that. And the level of support that we have had to give has been larger than we expected sometimes. And with LISC, you guys, your applications have been always so simple. I really appreciate it. And your responsiveness also makes it so much easier. And yet we do have to, sometimes you have had to be very patient with us. So what happened with this client? And what happened? Well, the client has to come in with some paperwork so that we can do something together, because she can't do it in the computer. So the digital gap is also a challenge that I feel we need to bridge.
Thank you for bringing that up, Irene. I feel like specifically now, as we dive into the new hybrid workspace, the digital divide is going to be a key issue that we need to bridge, so that communities of color and elderly individuals can access the same resources that everyone else can, right? Danielle, I was wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on how perceptions about race and ethnicity have impacted female entrepreneurship, with your insight as entrepreneur yourself, but also supporting and building the capacity of other female entrepreneurs.
I would say that I want to speak more about the data that's out there, even more so than perceptions, because I think the data trumps perceptions, and it really shows us, gives us an insight on the perceptions that people may have in regards to race and ethnicity, particularly if you look at minority women business enterprises and you look at the disparity study, the last disparity study that was done, New York City, utilization of minority and women business enterprises was about 10%. Of the total awards. If you break that down for African American females, they received about 2% of total awards. Hispanic females about 2%, 2.5%, and non-minority females was 4.2%. So when we think about the total utilization of WBEs, women business enterprises, it was about 5%, which is half of the utilization. But what the numbers show us is that there is that disparity within disparity, and that African-American females and Hispanic females are not really getting their fair share of contract opportunities. And so that lends to us, again, having this discussion that we continue to have about these inherent and systemic issues or perceptions of as it relates to race and ethnicity, and how can we begin to really make a difference in a positive way of changing these type of numbers that really impact the profitability and the growth of female entrepreneurs, particularly as it relates to race and ethnicity across the United States, but here we're talking about locally in New York City. And so I think that's very, very important. And that is, you know, I'll kind of speak to it more, you know, based on your other question, but that is one of the primary reasons why I did find the Council for Black Business Enterprises, you know, the nonprofit organization, is to address these type of disparities.
Thank you, Danielle. And keeping on the same topic of racial equity, Jesse, I was wondering if you can share with us how you at Renaissance embed racial equity into your work and leadership in order to create more equity and inclusion for entrepreneurship in New York City.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, you know, this is something that is very on the forefront of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When we think about that, Renaissance, all these years have made a very concerted effort to make sure that our staff represents the people that we want to serve. So when we think about my board, it starts from the top, right? It has to start from the top, and it's really the board member level. 100% of my board members are minority. So my board members are all minority individuals, and 50% of them are women. They have to be able to empathize what my clients are going through to serve as a board member. Because how would they be able to determine my mission in the work if they don't understand the population? So it really has to start from there. And then the board member then decides, how do we hire staff and hire the leadership of Renaissance? And they take it from the lens of what they know. And so when we think about the Renaissance team, you know, my leadership team is, again, 90% women. My staff is 70% women. And 90% of my team is minority. And we all speak different languages. And 90% of us are immigrants. So it's really about, if we want to talk about racial equity and leadership to create the equity and inclusion for our entrepreneur, if I'm creating a space, a nonprofit where I'm embracing women entrepreneurship and minority entrepreneurship, then my team needs to represent that population. Because if I don't, I will never be able to understand their challenges at a deeper human level. And that's the work we do. It's human work. So, you know, I think racial equity has to start with talking about who is the makeup of our leadership, our organization. And then we can really say, okay, let's create a space that makes sense for the people we want to serve. So I am very conscious about the people I hire. And how my staff outreaches into the community. When we go out to the community, we're very grassroots. My staff is literally on the ground, walking business to business in all corners of New York City, all the different neighborhoods, speaking the language of that local community. And so when I send my staff out, I know I'm going to say Corona in Queens. I have a Spanish speaker, I have a Chinese speaker, and I have a Korean speaker, counselor, and staff going out there, because I know that's the mix of the neighborhood, predominant language, right? So we're meeting where the clients are, and that's what I believe we're embedding that racial equity and into our institution.
Emilio, this is Danielle. I just want to build upon what Jesse said, and I'll just take a minute to make this point, is that I think it's critically important, as Jesse said, to have your board members and your staff really reflect the people that you are serving. But I think something that is critically important, and why I took the initiative in starting the Council for Black Business Enterprises, is because I think business owners themselves need to make sure that they have a seat at the table so that they can begin to empower themselves to participate in the decision-making process that is happening about them and for them. And that is a critical difference, but it's so important. And so when I speak about being an advocate, when I advocate for others, I'm advocating for myself as a Black female entrepreneur, because I am in those statistics when Black females are getting just, yes, I said just 2% of contract opportunities. That definitely impacts my bottom line. And so I think it's important for the business owners that are listening to think about how they can empower themselves to ensure that their voices are heard and that they are controlling their destiny just as much as they're expecting others to make the right decisions for them.
Can I add to that a little bit? Sorry, no, Oma, you go first.
No, I just, wanted to piggyback on that because I think it's extremely important what Jesse says and what Jesse said and what Danielle. We are a community development corporation that is a predominantly African-American organization in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And, I think it was very important that we had a presence in Bedford-Stuyvesant. There's lots of conversation going on about gentrification, and that also played into people's perception of the businesses. And we still, a majority of our businesses are still minority-run businesses, which that story didn't get out as much. The perception was that the businesses were being taken over, and they weren't minority-owned businesses that were being impacted at the scale as they were. And I thought that, this was extremely important for us. We have, many women in leadership here at Bridge Street, but it was also, we were out in the community. As our businesses were facing challenges with COVID, so were we as a community development corporation, who we were experiencing the same challenges with COVID as many of our businesses were. Everything from, funding to getting sick and having to manage our families, as well as, be in the forefront every day in the community doing the work we had to do. But it's interesting about racial and inclusivity, even in terms of opportunities and resources. We mentioned open streets. We're probably one of the, and there's a lot of controversy about open streets, which I acknowledge, but it was an opportunity for us, at least, to help increase foot traffic to our local businesses. There was a lot of pushback, and some of it had a lot of racial undertones. We couldn't have it in Bedford-Stuyvesant because it would be too violent. We couldn't do that because, we're a community development corporation. We weren't a bid. We were working, there are not enough businesses that need this type of support, which we were able to address all of those issues. It was not easy. And we were a team of women who were out on the weekends to make this a successful open street and to make it revenue generating for these businesses. And it was a success. It was difficult. We weren't closing on weekends. We were only doing it one day a week. But we actually worked with the Tompkins Avenue Merchants Association, which is led by women. And as a partner, we were able to bring a lot of focus, a lot of attention. We also were able to get a lot of exposure for these businesses and patronize many of the women-owned businesses so that we got their picture out there. We would love when somebody was like, can you recommend a business that we can profile? We would always make sure that we were targeting our business because we knew their stories. But that is, it was just a really amazing of some of the pushback and the perception of us trying to bring an opportunity like Open Streets, which was a real partnership with the businesses themselves who said we needed more foot traffic, we needed more support, we needed more resources, and we needed more visibility. That was some of the negativity that came with that. And that was, not only from outsiders, but even those, that, look like us. But we were doing this as a predominantly African-American, minority-run community development corporation who were investing and going to partner with our businesses to bring whatever resources were available to help them thrive. And we're very proud of that. And we also won the Alfresco Award for one of the best open streets. So we took a lot of pride as a minority organization working with minority businesses, especially one that 70% were women-owned businesses. We were able to make this happen.
Congratulations, Oma. That's great. It's great work. Can I say something as well along the lines of what's been said? I echo what everybody has said. The importance of having a staff and a board and consultants and clients who they're all diverse, and of course staff and board and our consultants also reflect the diversity of our clients. That importance I'm in total agreement with, but also along the lines of somebody was, Danielle, I think it was you mentioning the disparity study and how to you have to get involved as a business owner. I love your perspective as a business owner yourself as well. Get involved in the change that happens. Our CEO and president, her name is Kenya Abreu. She is very big on advocacy. And that's another thing that I wanted to highlight in terms of achieving this diversity. She encourages, if there are business owners in the audience, she encourages you to participate in the advocacy efforts that organizations like the ones that we're here are undertaking, so that you can also advocate for yourself as a business owner. I know that being a business owner takes a lot of time and it can be all consuming, but we as an organization encourage you to participate in advocacy as well.
Thank you all for sharing those insights. I feel like I could listen to the four of you talk all day, but in the interest of time, I'm going to ask one final closing questions for each of you. I was wondering if you could just share what advice you would share with an aspiring female entrepreneur as we look towards the horizon of the city recovering after the COVID-19 pandemic. Feel free to answer in whatever order.
I can go. Oh
yeah,
Jesse, you go.
No, Irene, all you. You go first.
I'll start. Okay, I'll be brief. So one of the things that I would advise is to be aware of your own finances. One of the barriers that was very evident when we were trying to help folks qualify for aid, for COVID-related aid during this pandemic time, financial like grants, was that the business owner sometimes did not know whether they made a profit in 2019, for example. So be aware of what happened, what is reflected in your taxes, because all of these opportunities, they're almost all going to ask for you to present your taxes. They're going to be based on your taxes. So have a basic understanding at least of your taxes, and know what the main numbers mean, like the profit line or the gross sales line. I think that's super useful for any business owner. And if you already know all of that, congratulations.
Thanks, Irene. I'll pass it to you, Jesse.
That's actually number one thing. Yes, Irene, I do agree with you on that. I think for myself, I mean, being, a child of a woman entrepreneur and a woman and leader, I've learned you can't do it all on your own. Okay, so I know women, we want to take on everything and solve it. And we're like, yes, I can do this and on my own. And I'm like, no, it's a lot. And so don't always try to do it on your own. Find people, find resources, find partners, find a team of people to support you, because you're a leader, you're a woman leader, you need that support. And don't be ashamed or feel embarrassed to ask questions and ask for help. I learned that the hard way myself, and I've come to realize the more questions you ask, the less pitfalls you'll see. And there's no dumb question, because when I was, myself, I had to learn numbers. I didn't know all the, I had to learn what a balance sheet was, right? So I literally had to ask the most basic questions. What do you mean by cash flow? So explain to me how that works. I don't understand it. So how does that work? What's the formula? And so through asking a lot of questions, nitty gritty, every little thing, that's how I learned numbers and stuff like that. So, and built a team of people to teach me. So don't be afraid. I think, we can't do it all on our own. But as female entrepreneurs, we have a lot of female people here in this room to support each other. Tap into those resources.
Thank you, Jesse. Omar, Danielle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with everything that was said, but I also, what I've admired about the women that I've worked with in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I always refer to Tama, but it's Thompson Avenue, but it's just in general with the women that I've encountered, is their ability to pivot. We talk about pivot all the time, but they have been amazing. If I could, shout out some of them, but I will say that, the Naomis and the Khadijas and the Angelas, and that in the midst of this adversity, they were able to diversify what they were going to offer. Some were able to use their businesses as part childcare, part community resource. They were creating nonprofit opportunities, as well as changing their business model so that they could really reflect what was going on at the time and still try to work on building a profit, or knew it would be a slow process and did what they had to do if it meant closing down for a couple of months, or what they needed to do, but not being afraid to pivot. That's almost one thing that we learn, is that almost has to be part of your plan. We now learn anything can happen, if it's weather related, or if it's a pandemic that still continues, or staff shortages. You have to be able to take that risk and know that that could happen, and you need to be able to have confidence that you can survive and come up with another plan. And I think that's really critical as we talk about the pivot. More discussions and stories on how many of these women entrepreneurs survive by being very creative on how they pivoted to make sure that they could stay afloat.
I promise, Emilio, I'm going to be short but sweet. And what I would say is that, as I share it with everyone, I at heart believe I'm a capacity builder, but I live what I preach. And what I would say to the other female entrepreneurs out there, and entrepreneurs in general, is that building capacity is not just about building your capacity as it relates to your skill sets. It's about expanding your mindset, because your business can only be as successful as you envision your business to be. And so it sounds very esoteric, but it is critically important, and that you know that the sky is the limit, and that you then put the intention out there to learn the skill sets, to get the resources that you need to be able to live your vision. And so that is my take-home message today, is that build the capacity of your mind, and everything else will follow.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you all for that incredibly valuable insight and advice and perspective throughout the whole discussion. I'll pass the mic to Talor Crawford for the Q&A section. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Emilio, and thank you so much, panelists, for sharing all of your wonderful insights about supporting women's entrepreneurship with us today. So we will now take questions from our audience. So again, if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to either share them in the chat or via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So to get us started, we do have one question that came in via the chat box. So the first question is, who are your best partners in advocating for the best women-owned small business policies as the city emerges from the pandemic? So I think it's appropriate to offer this question to all of you all, but I'm not sure if someone wants to start out.
I would start out, and I would say my best partners are those who believe in the vision that I have for the Council for Black Business Enterprises. And I want to give special thanks to my board members, which a lot of them are important stakeholders and influencers in the minority and women business enterprise space. And I was very intentional about who I asked to be part of this vision, because one, I knew this would be a heavy lift, but also I wanted to be able to build a community of stakeholders that really we were on one accord about having impact and really moving the needle in addressing the disparities that are out there in regards to contracting systems. That takes intentionality, that takes a concerted effort so that these policies and practices that are agreed upon can be taken back into their respective organizations to have influence and to make a change for us to all be change agents.
Thank you so much for that, Danielle. Would anyone else like to answer this question before we move on?
I'll not name partners, except for LISC. You are partners and you're fantastic ones. I will tell a small anecdote. I joined the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce in May 2021. And when I joined, there was already a relationship of the organization with LISC. And the staff, when we would be frustrated about something, they would say, wait until you work with LISC. It's good. Then this will be solved. So you were favorites here. Anyway, solid partners are those who offer us access to the communities that we want to serve, who are responsive, and who have the same vision that we do of bringing the resources to our communities. And yes, we have a few of them, and many in the Black community here in Harlem. They're always there. We make events. They always show up. They're the best. Anyway, thank you.
I'm not LISC NYC. I'm not saying that just because I'm here, but they were actually the first partner we had to provide grants that went directly to the businesses. And so that was a real opportunity for Brick Street. But we developed a very strong partnership with Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. So it's been amazing that through just these two partnerships, and yes, we've had plenty more, but it's been interesting that they became the catalyst for other partnerships that we were able to develop to help our small businesses. So through providing information and resources. So you need to start with strong partners. And I must say, LISC NYC and the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce were absolutely amazing. And definitely in terms of some of the advocacy that needed to be done when we would hear things on the ground, they also became a resource for us to really talk about, to inform them. And they also helped in getting information out to the community or to some of the elected officials and government agencies about what was really happening on the ground. And that was very important, that we knew that at least there was someone who had that direct access that could advocate on behalf of our business.
Yeah, so I think Renaissance has many different partners, and so LISC is definitely one of them too, right? And I really appreciate all the people who support our work, believe in our work, and foster that environment for us. But I definitely want to give a shout out that during the pandemic, the New York State CDFI Coalition, and Valerie White and I sit on the board of the New York State CDFI Coalition. We really advocated during the pandemic for that PPP loan to be opened up to minority small businesses. And I'm talking about very small. So the Coalition of Community Development Financial Institutions are a bunch of nonprofit lenders in New York State. And we advocated to do small little PPP loans. Because at the time, in the very beginning, it was just the big banks doing those loans. I would say in terms of policy and advocacy, the New York State CDFI Coalition has been a big, huge advocate in trying to move the needle in policy for our minority small business owners, women entrepreneurs. We do a lot of work in that space. I say, that's one of the key people, and we're literally directly speaking to our Senate, our Congress, trying to move the needle at the government level, making them recognize diversity, equity, inclusion, and the work we do and the value. That's my shout out.
Great. Thank you all so much for your answers there. So you all have talked a lot about the impact of COVID-19 on women-owned small businesses, but I'm wondering how you all specifically have stayed invigorated and excited about this work in the face of COVID-19 and other systemic challenges that have faced our country in New York City over the last few years. So again, I think this is appropriate for all of you. So whoever would like to start out first.
I'll start. Yeah, COVID was, it's been a challenge. And one way I've stayed, rejuvenated, I live in the community. I live in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Some people actually say I live, drink, and eat. Literally, Bedford-Stuyvesant is, and so I have a vested interest. I also have a daughter, a single parent, and who had to struggle with actually getting COVID over the holidays. So you can imagine how that has an impact. But having a close connection with some of these amazing women business owners, having such a vested interest. I actually lived on Tompkins Avenue at one point during COVID. And not only were these wonderful individuals were so generous to tell their stories, to kind of trust that, I was going to follow through with what we were going to do in terms of being a support and help. But some of them, as they were going through the struggle, I can remember numerous times, Naomi with Service as Our Rest would allow me just to rest in her space. Or, Khadijah with Life Wellness has an oasis in the backyard of her business. And, she always kind of could sense when I needed a timeout. So it was nice that we could, not only through the struggle, we could actually work very well. Tisha, who's the president of TAMA, we would have ongoing conversations every day, and whatever the struggles were, it would not only just be about business, it would just be about us. So it did help to make sure that I knew when I came to work every day, I had a purpose, and it continues because this work is so important. And these individuals, these women, these business owners in general, and this community, we were vested in survival. And that is what kept me going, and we'll continue.
Thank you so much for that, Oma. Would anyone else like to share?
I'll go. I would say that for me, for these past 2 years, I have to say, again, as it relates to building capacity, I have been stretched beyond my limits. I feel like I have been like a rubber band that continues to be stretched. So I'm living and breathing the very things that we're talking about because I am that business owner. Fortunately for me, I'm that type of person that I see adversity and I look for the opportunities in adversities. And I say that because I have not been resistant to the stretching. I have gone head first into it. So, I haven't really touched upon it today, but I did the Black Business Owners Forum, which is a one-day virtual event. I was not, and technically I'm still not an event planner. But guess what, folks? I figured it out. And I'm proud to say that I did a damn good job. I never even thought about starting a nonprofit organization. And thank God I have the board of directors that are right there with me, and they are helping me navigate even how to be chair of a board. But I wake up every day, and I'm not saying this in a Pollyannish way, to go, wow, I learned something new today. I probably would not have stretched myself in this capacity if not for COVID-19. And so I welcome that. I'm excited about it. I wake up every day learning how to do something different. I mean, I just bought a webcam, and the person that helps me with my technology, we were up to 10:30 last night figuring things out with the webcam. I'm like, whoa, I figured something else out. So I'm excited about that. And that's what I would say for me. And I hope that other business owners feel that way, because I think your perspective and your perception makes all the world the difference in your approach and how you feel about what we've been going through these past 2 years.
Maybe I'll share a little bit too. I'm very invigorated by Danielle and Oma now. You know, I was born and raised Brooklyn, New York. I'm a New Yorker down and out. And so I feed off of the vibrancy of our communities, and small businesses is really New York City, right? Like, let's be honest, what makes us unique is our small business owners and the creativity they bring to the city. And so because I really love going out, eating, buying stuff, like during the pandemic, no matter how stretched I was, how difficult, difficult challenges we were facing, personally, professionally, I knew that once I walked out of my apartment and felt the energy of the city again is what kept me going. I wanted to see my small business owners come back, because I want that energy. I thrive on that type of, you'll one day when you see me in person, you'll notice I'm an extreme extrovert, and I like to be, that energy is what keeps me going.
I think business owners are a unique kind of people. They're very energetic. They themselves give us the energy. And yes, creative and resilient. Our staff is motivated by helping. And when the pandemic came, the need came, and that just invigorated the staff to do the work. But there's other aspects of this crisis that brought us opportunity. Like Danielle said, the opportunity was to see more sort of in the raw what the barriers are, and to be able to measure them. We've tracked as best we could, and with a lot of detail, why people weren't getting the aid that they deserved or that they needed. And that helped us rethink or tweak a little bit our services so that we address that more clearly. And that clarity that this intense time brought about, I think, has been useful.
Thank you all so much for your answers, and thank you, audience, for your questions. We are at 2:30, so I will pass things back over to Emilio for some brief closing remarks.
Thank you, Talor, and thank you again to our inspirational, phenomenal panelists for sharing their experiences with us. This has been a very illuminating conversation that has taught me personally a lot, and I'm sure members of the audience feel exactly the same way. This presentation panel will be uploaded on LISC NYC's website shortly if you would like to reference it later. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Great panel.